How's it going, chasers? I hope you're having a kick-ass week. Today I'm here to tell you about this. I'm going to share how I made this, and this is a Manuka smoked single malt. It's an interesting one, guys, and I've been looking forward to making this for so long. Welcome to Distiller, everyone. I'm Jesse, and this is the channel all about chasing the craft of home distillation. So if you like making stuff like this, if you want to make stuff like this, or you just want to know more about how stuff like this is made so you can enjoy it more when you buy it from the liquor store or the shop or whatever, this is the channel for you. Make sure you hit subscribe down below so you don't miss anything. Alright guys, like I said at the very beginning, I have been wanting to make this exact spirit since before I started the channel. This is one of the things that I thought, I will make this when I start distilling. And the reason is that it is so ridiculously New Zealand-y. It's just, I mean, Manuka, if you know Manuka, if you're from New Zealand, it's just part of New Zealand. The honey, the smoke, it's part of New Zealand, and it's only from New Zealand. That's why it's so cool. So I felt like I just had to do this at some stage. So I'm really, really stoked to be able to try it. This was an interesting one, guys, and it was interesting because the distilling that just kind of happened, the big thing to me was the ingredient. The Gladfield's Manuka smoked malt made up 100% of the grist, and then making the cuts and trying to decide which way to wrangle this stuff. So that's where this video really focuses. Anyway, I will say right now that you'll notice if you get to the end of the video that I was worried about a braised meat sort of smoke rather than a woody smoke that came through after I'd blended, and I hoped that that would fade in time. It's fading already. It's been here for about a week now. It does have the wood in it. You'll also notice that as well when you get to the end. You'll know what I'm talking about. I'm really excited for this stuff, guys. So let's get stuck in.
The star of the show here is Gladfield's Manuka smoked malt, and in fact it is 100% of the grist, 100% of the grain recipe. So thanks a bunch to Gladfields for sending this to me to try out. Now Patreons, I get an extra 3 kilos of this stuff to give away, so make sure you check the lenses today. As you can see, I ground this really fine, and that's because I'm using claw hammers set up to mash in. I'm not too worried about that. I'm using 15 kilos of Manuka smoked malt today, and I'm aiming for 65 litres of wash. That means we're going to have to get a little creative with the way we do this. I mashed in with around half the grain and about 30 litres of water. I used the strike calculator over on the Chase the Craft website to decide the temperature to mash in at, and I was aiming for 64 degrees Celsius. I let this mash for 1 hour, opening up a couple of times to give it a good stir, but making sure it was insulated well. I lifted the grain basket, drained into my fermenter, and sparged with about 8 litres of 70 degree water. Now that the grain basket was empty, I was ready to mash the second half of the grains, and to do so, I actually used the runnings from the first mash. That allowed me to use a whole lot more grain with a whole lot less water than I would have been able to do otherwise and get a much higher gravity. So the second mash, other than that, was pretty much exactly the same as the first one, and it resulted in a wash of about 67 degrees at 1082 or 1.082. This went into the fermentation chamber at 21 degrees Celsius, and I fermented this with Lallemand Nottingham Ale yeast. This yeast actually fermented it out really dry, down to about 10:05, so I racked 40 litres over into the boiler for the first stripping run, leaving the yeast cake behind. So just while the boiler's heating up, guys, I thought I'd take a second to talk about this yeast. It's the first time I've ever used it. I have not seen it referenced for distilling before, so I thought it would be interesting to give it a go, see what I think about it, and this was kind of a fun one to try it on. But, so just so you remember, guys, this was 1083 to start with. It's now 1005, right around 10%. I think it's a touch over 10%. And it ripped through it. It's done an awesome job. It's clean. There's no weird off flavors. No diacetyl, actually, which is kind of crazy, because it's only been in there a week. But to be fair, there's smoke in this, so it might be hiding behind the smoke. Yeah, I don't get the mouthfeel of diacetyl at all, which is cool. It's really clean. A touch of fruitiness, I guess, maybe. There's definitely something in there
almost like an English yeast. Well, actually, it makes sense, right? It's a Nottingham ale yeast. So it is kind of like SO4. It's a little bit like SO4, but not nearly as strong. So all in all, guys, I'm thinking this could be a really interesting distiller's yeast. It ferments to a high ABV easily and relatively quickly. It ferments pretty clean. It lets the original ingredients shine through, and it adds a slight bit of fruitiness. I mean, most spirits can benefit from a little bit of something like that, right? Yeah, I'm happy. Let's see what it tastes like off the still though, right?
Making sure not to forget the butter to ensure against a boil over. I stripped this down pretty hard and fast, all the way down to around about 10% actually. I went down that low, making sure not to leave any of the smoke behind so I can make the decisions later on. I emptied the boiler out, recharged it with the rest of the straight wash, which is about another 25 litres, and added back in the low wines from the first stripping run. That let me settle into another pot still run, running a little bit slower this time and collecting once again all the way down to about 10%. Like pretty much always, I collected into individual 500ml cuts jars.
So the spirit run is all done. I've collected all the cuts into jars. It's time to blend those back together and decide what makes the cut, what doesn't. At this point in the process, I normally have a pretty solid idea of what I'm going to do after waiting for 24 hours. I've tasted it coming off the still. I've got an idea in my head where I want to go, and then I come in, taste the cuts, and go in that direction. This time, however, yeah. The plan for this originally was to get a lot of wood smoke flavors, a lot of sweet smoke flavors, and then combine those with the grungy, ashy sort ofness that I would find further down the tails. That was my plan, and the kind of overall profile that I was going for is something like Lafroig. Probably less like Lafroig 10 and more like Lafroig Select, a little bit more grungy, a little less refined and brought together. After tasting everything coming off the still, it tastes a little prettier than that. It's still got that smoke, big, full-on sort of smoke flavor that's sitting there with it. But at the same time, it's also got this really nice malty sort of backbone to it that's running through a lot of the cuts, and quite a nice, almost tropical sort of sweetness as well. And that made me think that maybe I should switch that profile a little bit. So what I'm going to do, actually, hold on guys, I've grabbed all of the peated products, commercial peated products I could find in the house, and yeah, this is kind of the profile I was going for. I knew it was going to be a different flavor, totally different smoke obviously, but yeah, smoky, earthy, and then grungy at the back end. Yeah, sort of finishes briny. It's all about kind of doubling down on that grunge and the spiky jagginess of the smoke all the way through. I don't think that's what this whiskey is going to do for me. I just don't think that's what's going to happen. The first thing that came to mind in terms of a flavor profile, after really tasting what was coming off the still and thinking about it a bit, was Ardbeg. And the Ardbeg 10, yeah, the reason being that for me, Ardbeg kind of goes in a little bit of a different direction than Lafroig. It has this great smoky characteristic and the kind of iodine-y brininess, but then it kind of takes a right turn into something a lot more pretty than the Lafroig. It's got a lot more nuance and subtlety, a lot more interesting different things going on the sweet side of things. And that kind of made me wonder if I should go that way more. I did want to grab these ones too, just to have a smell, see if it's... No. The malt character, like the actual malt, the malted barley character in this, is much closer. More towards prunes, grapes. Okay, so I think the malt profile is closer to this. The smoke side of it is closer to this. But both of them in my mind, and I think honestly that's more what I want to go for. So I do want to keep the ash, I do want to keep a little bit of the brine, but I want to make that malt sweetness shine through. Fun's over. That was a damn fine tasty drink. So I'm going to get stuck into the cuts and I will let you know how I get on at the end. Alright guys, I'll tell you what, that kind of blew my taste buds out. I actually have to go inside and get Mrs. Stillet's opinion on this before I moved ahead. So I'll tell you what I did initially. Jars 5 through 11 were great. And that went from malt sweet and kind of fruity through malty, nutty and grassy, through into sort of grungy, smoky, and then ashy. Put all those together and I couldn't taste any smoke whatsoever. So I took it inside to ask Mrs. Stillett. She did think that it was smoky, but not crazy smoky. I let myself sit for a bit of time, recover some taste buds, and went back and tasted, actually back up to number 4 as well. And number 4 actually had a little bit of smoke and ash, and the heads weren't that bad, but they had more of that tropical sweetness. Not crazy fake estery sweetness, just nice tropical fruit sort of flavoured sweetness. So I allowed myself to go a little more headsy than normal. Probably going to let this age for quite a while, so I'm cool with that. I did not go any further down than 12 though. I added 12 in as well, and this is the final blend. Mrs. Stillett approved. Yeah, okay, so it's got that grassiness that everything that I've ever made that's got malted barley in it has had, pretty much all of it. And in my opinion, in my experience so far, that ages out in about sort of 3 months with what we're doing. So I'm trying to look past that. The smoke has become less light and woody and a little bit more grungy and a little bit more like braised smoked meat, which I'm not ecstatic about. I liked the smoke profile that I was tasting off the still better, and I think maybe I've muddled it a little bit by adding too many different components of that together. At the same time, I think when it gets some wood sweetness and some age on it, I think that will become more sort of amalgamated with each other and take on a more defined flavour. That's what I'm hoping for anyway. That's the only thing that's really not what I wanted there in there at the moment. You take a sip, you get the sweetness, the tropical fruit, the smoke, the grungy smoke, touch of ash, and then it fades off into the malt sweetness. Now all of those things at the moment are quite rough and they're not collected, but that's what I'm hoping age is going to do to this spirit. Speaking of age, here's the plan, guys. If you'll remember what is now called Chimera, thank you very much Patreons for voting on that. The All Faints run that I did a little while ago, this is one of the high or the heads end of that run. So it's got a little bit more rumminess to it than the rest, and it's been aging with quite a large piece of charred American white oak in the bottom there. Now I knew all along that was way too much oak for this, single jar, but the idea was to bump it way up with a full lot of flavour to start with, reduce the amount of wood in it and let it go for longer after that. What I think I'm going to do is when I get to that stage, I'm going to sit on this single malt whiskey, and when I get to that stage I'm going to take that American oak out of here and put it into this. And the idea behind that is that I do think this is very much sitting in single malt Scotch territory, and I'd like to age it in a way that's sort of appropriate to that. So I want the influence of the wood. I want the more subtle flavors from the oak, not the big bold new white American oak flavors like you get in most bourbons or traditional sort of flavored bourbons anyway. And I am getting a whole lot of that in this now. Can still taste the base spirit heaps, but that wood is coming out to play in a big way. So all of those big, really bold characteristics from the charred American oak are going to end up in this whiskey and leave something much more delicate to go into the single malt. In addition to that, honestly, just the more sort of fruity, tropical flavors that are in the Chimera, I think are going to add something special to this as well and give it that complexity on the sweet side of things. Honestly, all in all, I'm pretty happy with that. It didn't turn out exactly the way that I envisioned it from the jump, but I think it's got a lot of potential. I think I'm going to be really happy with that. In about 6 months, I think it's going to be okay. In about a year, I think it's going to be really good. Honestly, if that smoke doesn't tame itself a little and it does stay kind of jaggy, maybe it turns into a blending spirit. Either way, I think it's got a lot of potential. Either way, I'm really excited that I did this way. And once again, guys, thank you to Gladfield for hooking me up for the malt. I think you guys are doing awesome stuff, and I really appreciate being able to get local products for me. I also need to say a huge thank you to the Patreons. The stuff does not happen without you guys, so thank you so very much. Alright guys, so there you have it. Something that I am excited to see what happens with over the next couple of years. I would be really interested to hear what you have to say about this. If you've tried something similar, if you've tried a wood smoked barley before, I'd be really interested to know. Alright, I'm out of here team. Thanks so much for hanging out. It's always a pleasure. If you liked the video, like it. If you really liked it, make sure you subscribe. Blah, 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 blah. Too much whiskey tonight, guys. And if you really, really liked it, I'd appreciate checking out the Patreon page and seeing if that's right for you as well. I'm out of here, guys. Keep on chasing the craft. Cheers.